legitimate. But you have to ask them about that. I mean, that hasn't been one of the first things they've thrown at me when I start talking to them. And again, they're people who still have hope that Donald Trump is going to pull off an upset here in Pennsylvania. Now, a lot of them say that we'll have to see what happens, and they do kind of, nod to Philadelphia, and they say, you know what happens there. But for now, there is still kind of a feeling that he could pull it off here.
Sue Davis, your comments on that?
Well, we have some updated results. Some races are being called in this 8 o'clock hour. Hillary Clinton has taken a narrow lead in the electoral votes with 44 to Donald Trump's 31. She has won Delaware, Maryland, Massachusetts, New Jersey, and right here in Washington, D.C. Donald Trump picked up Oklahoma. Again, no surprises in these early votes, reliably conservative and reliably Democratic states. We can also call that Marco Rubio has won re-election to a second term in the state of Florida. He was competing against Democratic Congressman Patrick Murphy. He was expected to win this race, so that is not a surprise result, but it is another bright spot early in the evening for Senate Republicans.
So let's go now to Florida, where we've got NPR's Greg Allen on the line, who is with the campaign of Marco Rubio. Greg, I imagine this is an ebullient moment for this campaign. This was tight for him.
Well, Rachel, I don't think the word has filtered down here yet. People are not reacting. It has not been called by some of the folks on TV, and so we've not gotten reaction here in the crowd. Of course, Senator Rubio's not here, but as you've been saying, this was a race that he was expected to win, but it turned out to be much more of a contest than they had hoped for, and they battled down to the end. But Patrick Murphy, a first-term congressman, just was not able to pull it off.
This has been quite a story for Marco Rubio this year. A year ago, he looked like one of the young hopefuls of the Republican Party to get the presidential nomination. He lost after being famously embarrassed in a debate by Governor Chris Christie of New Jersey, and then he retired. He had said he wouldn't run for the Senate. So this was a kind of an improvised race that he made for the Senate.
Well, I'm not sure how improvised it ended up being in the end, but it is true that he kept saying that he was not going to run. He said that repeatedly over and over again.
Sounds like word has maybe gotten out.
Yes, in Florida. We starting to get the word of what's going on here. But at the very last minute, Marco Rubio decided to get into the race. He was convinced to run by others in the party, he said, and it was an uphill battle, really, for in many ways. He had to answer questions about why he was getting back in, but he did so, and it's paid off for him tonight.
Greg, how did he run with Donald Trump at the top of the ticket? I mean, what was that dance like for him?
He's been on a tightrope, saying that he's not an ideal candidate. He stood by the things he said about Donald Trump, but he was pressed on whether he wouldn't say whether he would trust him with the nuclear codes. Ultimately, that was one of the questions he wouldn't answer. But he said that he thought he was a better choice than Hillary Clinton, and that he was going to vote for him.
Ron, I want to turn to you, if I could. Ron Elving here in the studio with me. So we've just heard that Marco Rubio has won his bid for the Senate in Florida. What does that mean, if anything, about Donald Trump's chances in Florida, which is a must-win for him?
Donald Trump really needs to win Florida. At the moment, with over 80% of the vote in, he is trailing, but only trailing slightly. That race has bounced around a little bit. It's gotten a little wider lead for Hillary Clinton, then a little narrower. We still have a lot of the vote to count, and as we have already said, we take Florida very slowly and very seriously. So that last 18% of the vote in Florida could move the lead back and forth several times. But at this hour, the Trump campaign would very much like to be saying they're confident of winning Florida. We're not hearing that from them at this point. The Clinton people seem to be smiling, and Florida is a big question mark. 29 electoral votes, the biggest of the battlegrounds, the state that it is extremely difficult to imagine Trump making it to the White House without. So Marco Rubio has clearly run many points, we don't know exactly how many yet, but high single digits at least, ahead of his old nemesis, Donald Trump, in his own home state.
Do we know anything about Latino turnout in Florida through the exit polling at this point?
Yes, we know from the early voting that as many Hispanic voters voted early this time as voted in the entire election in 2012. That's a pretty remarkable statement, and it indicates a strong growth in the interest of Hispanic Americans in the presidential election. Of course, the obvious explanation for that would be their aversion to Donald Trump, because they do seem to have been voting for Hillary Clinton, and they do seem to have turned out in record-breaking numbers.
We should say that Senator Wicker of Mississippi, who was on earlier, he had a number. He said that in South Florida, Marco Rubio was running 10 points ahead of Donald Trump, and that would be that would give him quite an advantage, and it would suggest that he is not his win in Florida does not necessarily augur well for Donald Trump.
Although we do still need to hear from the Panhandle, we still need to hear from some of the